Hey everyone, and thank you for joining me this evening. Today I have got Ben joining me. I'm not even going to try and pronounce his surname because I mess it up every time I try to say it. I'll let him teach me how to say it as well as teach me how to use Statamic. So, without further ado, let me bring him in. And here we go. Hey Ben, how you doing?
Not too bad. Good evening, everyone.
Good.
So surname, it's think of it like Murphy with a PHY, and that's
Furfie.
usually the easiest way.
I wanted
Yes,
to say that, but I didn't want to completely mess it up,
it's
to be
yeah,
honest.
it's a weird misspelling.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
it's a
awful
weird
with
misspelling
names as
that's
it is,
called.
so if I'm not sure, I just avoid or ask to be taught because there's nothing worse than
Yeah,
butchering someone's name, right?
yeah. I worked in the Middle East for a couple of years, and obviously you can imagine that there are a lot of people out there with names that you living here in the UK or wherever you
Yeah,
wouldn't actually be even like Dutch names and stuff. They're really hard to pronounce, and I just kind of shed my embarrassment and just said, "How do you say your name? I do not want to butcher your name. There's nobody's ever gonna like go. How do you not know my name? Yeah.
yeah.
So
Well, you never know. So tonight
mm,
you're going to teach me how to use Statamic or Statamic.
Statamic. Yeah, that's another one.
Statamic.
Yeah.
That's another one I've butchered. I'm pretty sure you told
I
me how to
know.
say
It's
it
all right.
earlier too. Um,
Oh no, don't worry. Everyone calls it Statamic or Satanic or
Satanic.
some weird sort of it. The way that I was always told it was that it's a portmanteau of static and dynamic, so statamic,
That
which I
sounds
suppose is
cool.
yeah. Anyway, yeah,
Yeah. So we're going to be. I've got my own website which I'm going to attempt to rebuild in Laravel. It's very basic, but it's got some different sorts of data types, and it's going to be something that we can build and get a good understanding of Statamic as we go. Um, I've never used it myself, so I'm really interested to see how we get on. And it's a really good
yeah,
test because I mean this is going to be my website, and as you can see, I'm the engineering manager at Current Classic, and Ben is actually joining us at Current Classic, which is exciting.
yeah. Can't wait. It's going to be a very exciting role.
Yeah,
And it's
definitely.
going to be awesome to work with you as well, and Ashley as well. So and the rest
Yeah,
of the team that are joining. So
definitely. So, Statomic. I'm gonna have to try and get that in
yes,
my head. Where do I start? I've got a Laravel app. I mean, there's two ways to install to start a Statomic project, right?
yeah, yeah. So the two ways are you've got CLI. So in the same way that you can Laravel new up a project, Statamic also have a CLI that you can install via Composer and run it to basically set that up. Running Statamic new, fairly keeping with conventions of how Laravel does stuff. The other option is that you can install into an existing Laravel project.
Yep.
Now, I would always err on the side of caution there. It really depends what you're looking to do. What I always say is if you've got an existing Laravel app and you're considering Statamic because your knowledge base is Laravel based, which absolutely makes 100% sense, it doesn't necessarily mean that it makes sense to put it into the existing app. What you got to bear in
Yeah.
mind is if you've got a marketing team who are constantly pushing changes or suddenly realize that they've made a spelling mistake and then want to push again, and then it's potentially taking 20 minutes to deploy your app,
Yeah.
your infrastructure team are not going to be happy. So,
Definitely.
it's one of those where you kind of need to be very, very careful about which approach you take. Now, in the scenario that you've got, where you've got an existing Laravel app and you want to make editable, it makes perfect sense. It's kind of Jack and the team at Statomic, sort of compare it as like a potential alternative Nova if you
Yeah.
are primarily managing content rather than sort of data. So, shall we run through
The
the
install.
the documentation? As I say, always keep one of the things is there are some parts of this documentation that are still a little bit loose on the ground or a little bit sort of light.
Is that because it's a new
But
version
this,
just come out, right?
yeah, it came out, I think it was about 15, 16 months ago. I mean, it was in alpha and beta for a lot longer than that. But yeah, it's up to version 3.3 now, and they've recently announced that they're going to start linking the releases to the actual main Laravel release cycle. Don't quote me on exactly what it is that they're adding it to, but yeah. So as you're going through that now, that's all pretty
Get that installed in
much
the background.
self-explanatory. Yeah. So once we've done that, there are a couple of other things that we can do. Now, obviously, it really depends on what you need. So with that page that you were just on then, for example, it talks about creating a couple of new migrations. You might not need this. The crucial thing is that it doesn't quite make it 100% clear. But it creates a new table called activations because it handles the activation slightly differently to the users created that.
Okay.
But if you're not going to have a lot of new users joining the Statamic state,
just myself.
Yeah. So there's not a huge amount of point in that.
Yeah.
And as I understand, this is where you kind of go, yeah, not, and I get told it's not. But anyway, as I understand, when you are creating it as something that's in a Laravel app already, it will basically create it with the Eloquent driver. So by default, Statamic uses a flat file system, hence the static dynamic is primarily marketed as a flat file content management system. Everything by default is file driven. When you put it into a existing Laravel app, it will install it with the Eloquent driver, and I believe the default state for users is to be managed through the Laravel app. So you can amend that behavior so you keep them separate, which would be useful if you were talking about, let's say, having a marketing team or a marketing person going in there. But it really depends. It's very, very flexible in terms of how it's set up, but obviously it very much depends on the sort of the use case.
So for my specific use case, it's just myself building a site I can blog on and I can add other content on, and it's maybe like a freelancer would build a website like this, or maybe someone building something for their pet project which is built in Laravel and they want content driven aspect to it as well. Maybe there's not extra people, maybe it's just a bootstrap SaaS. How would we I like that. Jack's got some good detail on
I love that.
Hey Nathan, thanks for joining. So I've installed. We are looking good.
Okay, you have installed it.
I have got the content directory.
Yeah, it has two directories. It has a content directory and a users directory.
Yep.
It also does a little bit more than that in the config file. So if you open config, you'll notice that there's a Statamic folder, which has a lot of gubbins to it. Yep. And there's a couple of other places make some minor amendments, but nothing too over the top. What we can do now that we've installed it, the way that you would normally check it is if you go to your browser and you go to the website. Now, I know this won't work because we had a discussion before about something and I had to play around with it. It won't work, but it's a good one to pick up on.
Yep.
If you put append, so as with WordPress, the admin section is a root on the end, whereas it's WP admin for WordPress, it's just CP for control panel. Now, if we hit that, it will redirect us to your other page. Yes. So obviously we had a discussion about this before.
Yeah.
You have set up an all routes capture. So the trick is to go into the web and just basically disable that final one.
For now?
Just for now, yeah.
I'll do that.
Yeah, cool.
Ha ha ha. We
Okay,
have
cool.
Statamic.
Right, so we need to do a very, very minor migration, if I remember correctly. I'm just going to
Okay.
double check myself.
I'm just noticing
As I
that
said,
the
I don't.
color contrast actually blends really nicely with my light bulb.
Yeah, with the background. Okay, cool. So I'm just going to double check this. Where have we got that? So, yeah, so what we need to do now is we just need to try and run 2 migrations. So if you go back to the storing using the database one, I think was that the one that you had open for the docs?
Storing users in a database.
That's the one. Yeah, if you go into that, we'll ignore the first bit because that's not really relevant to us. That's the bit I was talking about before where, and the second bit as well. That's just if we want to actually allow users to be added. First things first, we want to run that first one. And for anybody who's not used Statamic, might not be 100% clear about what the please command is. It's the Statamic team's own kind of wrapper around Artisan to make it a little bit easier to basically do frequent commands. So
it's very similar to Artisan.
It pretty much is. Like I say, it's pretty much I believe just going back.
App
so
make
Statamic
the
2
console kernel or app make the please kernel, and then basically we're going to handle the same thing and shut down the application. It's doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, I think
just the main kernel behind it is slightly different there, isn't it?
Yeah. So I believe it's and obviously I don't want to be speaking out of turn.
That's not going to work.
No.
Because I am on Docker, of course.
Yeah.
And there we go. Auth tables.
There we go. Okay, cool. Right, so if we go to your database now, and let's just double check and make sure that that is actually set up correctly.
Oh, I haven't actually connected to the database yet. So we will just quickly add a data source in here. This is obviously, can I do that? And the database should be test that connection. We're all good. So we're now in the database.
And if we go to the users table.
Yep.
Cool. So we can see that's in there, and we can see that they've got you've now got a type of super between avatar and preferences. So within Statamic world, Statamic land, a super user is basically a user who has all rights and permissions, or role. So it's a role effectively with all permissions. So what we can do now is if you go to your CP page, so the web browser.
Yep.
Go to login. So in the past, this is what always trips people up when they're moving over from 2 to 3. You used to be able to use a username. Now it is a email address enforced. So use the email address that you have registered with for the for this site or for the Laravel app, and the password should.
I haven't got any emails registered. I haven't got anything registered.
Oh, that would be why it's blank. Right. Okay. Let's create a user.
So I'm assuming I can make user.
Yeah. So you should be able to. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Oh God, this is where we're going to.
So it'd be sell please, won't it? I think. Is it sell PHP please? And it should give us a nice walkthrough in theory. And there we go. I think that's what I was saying before. Is that
models user not found? So basically, I haven't got a user model yet because I haven't got Breeze or anything installed. So what I need to do is create a new user model. I'm not going to do anything to this. No, I'm going to need to, aren't I? I believe. I'll tell you what, I'll go grab the content from another project.
Yeah.
Because I want to make sure it's done correctly.
It's got everything in it.
Exactly. I'm not bothered about any of the other parts to it, just the fillable parts that we know is going to matter. Now let's go. Make a user.
Okay, right. So we just put in an email address. Okay, your name. Okay.
That's simple.
Cool. It is that simple, yeah. Okay, cool. So we try and log in now.
We are logging in.
Boop. Right, okay. Must be a type of authenticator.
No,
so I think that's just
that is a me problem. Because I'm extending model, not. Is it extends? Oh, I definitely need to go back and make sure I get the right thing from that.
Yeah.
Authenticatable. Which one is it? That.
So obviously, if you go with the CLI approach, it kind of sets all this up for you. This is just the fun that comes with trying to put it into an existing project. But the good thing is it works with script types, so can't complain.
It worked. See, it wasn't that painful.
Hey! No, exactly. It shouldn't be that easy anyway. Otherwise, what do we get paid for?
New user. And we're all good.
Awesome. Cool. So let's, if we temporarily go back to the actual design, we can do that, or we can, if you just go back to the, yeah, it is a design. It is a design. If you just go back to the dashboard for 1 second.
Yeah.
So quick trick, the .com here will actually open up the site for you.
Oh, nice.
So just saves clicking back and forth a little bit. So what would you prefer me to do? Would you prefer me to basically talk you through what we would do, or what the first steps I would do if I was building a new Statomic site, or had been given
how
a
would you
brief
start a Statomic site, and then once we've got that, we'll start asking questions, and I'll start pestering you. And if you were teaching someone how to build a Statomic site, where would you start?
Okay, so I think your own streams kind of point at the correct approach, what I would typically do anyway, which is, think about the data structures. Everything is a data structure. I mean, this is primarily concerned with managing content, but in the same way as any kind of application, whether you're building one that manages CVs or whether it's a shop or anything like that, a CRM, everything is data. Definitely. So within Statomic, you can see on the left-hand side, we've got what are 5 native content model structures. So you've got collections, you've got navigation, taxonomies, assets, and globals. And with potentially the exception of globals, most people who've worked with a content management system should be familiar with those, those basic concepts. Collections, if you've ever worked with WordPress, that's the concept of a page and a post and whatever else you have there. Navigation is pretty self-explanatory. Taxonomies are basically ways of linking different data together. Assets is, again, very self-explanatory. And globals are basically content that doesn't change across the website. So a really good example of this is creating a content type to manage your social media links. Or it could be other common details. If you were a business, it might be the business name, the year it was founded, VAT number, that type of thing.
Okay.
So going down to the next bit, we've got our fields. And again, if you've worked with Statamic 2, this is a little bit different now. In the past, the concept was just field sets. That has now kind of been pushed down a little bit, and you've now got the higher level idea of blueprints. So blueprints deal with a whole page. A field set might deal with a smaller subsection of a page. So a good example of this is if you were looking at a typical marketing website, a field set might be like the hero section.
Okay.
And you might have a content section, et cetera, but the blueprint is what puts all of that together.
Okay.
Further down, we've got forms, updates, add-ons, and utilities. These are very much kind of tools for building out the CMS. So I don't think we'll be using forms on this, but the forms functionality on Statamic is pretty good. Forms can be quite a pain in the backside to build frequently. There's not a massive range of add-ons at the moment. It's a healthy range, but as kind of we were saying before, Steve, if you compare it to something like WordPress, it's not really a fair comparison, as the vast majority of plugins in WordPress are there to help people interact with the database rather than to actually necessarily provide functionality. So it's it's one of those things that's kind of very, very high level what what Statamic's defaults are. So what I would typically recommend, the first thing that you do is to look at... That's fine, don't worry. Do you need to get that, or is Amy going to go?
No, Amy's got that, don't worry.
Fair enough, no problem. Let's hope my doorbell doesn't go off, because otherwise you will hear my dog, who really does not like the doorbell. But anyway, so I think that the key thing that I always say is, like I said, start with the data. So I think if we go back to the actual website now, and we basically just start thinking about the type of content that we've got on the website. So looking at this is very much what we would traditionally consider a page. The content here is not going to change that often, but the blogs underneath will.
Yep.
So this is very much a page, but we'll cover the concept of that type of dynamic content slightly later.
Okay.
If we then go to posts, again, this is kind of more of a page, but with less content on it. So we'll think a bit carefully about this one. Again, users, YouTube, packages. Again, these are all pages. Effectively, they're all hierarchical data. They can be a child of another piece, but they kind of sit on their own. So we obviously need pages, and every website needs pages, really. So that kind of comes out of the box with Statamic. But what we don't have is a concept of posts. Now, we can call this whatever we want. We can call them posts. We can call them entries. We can call them articles. It's whatever fits in with the naming convention that you're used to. Okay. So if we start out with building these pages out, just so we've got some stuff done. If we go to collections, okay, and if we create a collection, okay, cool. So one thing that we do need to think about here, actually, before we dive into this, is the different types of data that are going to appear on those pages. So we could potentially have several different types of pages. So actually, sorry, let's just quickly go back to the actual site for 2 seconds. So this is very much a heavy content page. So this is kind of, we've got a title, we've got a block of content. So it's one of those things where, the default of block of content and a title is probably sufficient. Are we likely to add anything else here, or
No, not on here. Other than having the latest blog posts down the bottom, for example, that, and then obviously users is relatively similar in a lot of regards there.
Yeah, interestingly though, I would actually consider that slightly different, but we'll go over that in a second.
The last time I did a content managed site, I can't even remember when that was.
It's fine. So I think the other one that we want to think about is, do we want to basically have this as the latest one, or do we want some kind of functionality to highlight posts, so to be able to control the ones that appear
maybe
at the top of the page, or should we just stick with latest?
Yeah, that's what's on my current website. So on my current website, obviously I've not updated in a very long time. It's got my latest blog post, which was back in June last year.
This year, surely. Isn't it still 2020?
It's 2022. It has changed.
It has.
So yeah, okay, I just keep the latest 2, 3, however many on the homepage. Keep it dynamic.
Cool. Okay, so yeah, that's fine. All right, cool. So we've got a page then that has some content and no real requirement to control the content that appears below through the content management system.
Yep.
So that one's fine. If we go to posts, that is literally just a heading, isn't it? So what I might do with that one is give you a slightly different use case with that one. I mean, it's not what I typically do, but it might just be a good example of how you can do a page a slightly different way.
Because posts, YouTube, and packages are all the same thing, just listing different content.
Effectively, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, cool. What we're going to do then is we are going to go back to the collection. We'll just create a basic one called, let's create one called posts to start off with. Or articles or entries, whatever you would normally refer to.
I'll call it posts because that's what I've called it in my head.
Cool. All right. That's fine. All right. Awesome. So let's create that collection. Okay, cool. So it'll basically always bring up this widget with some really helpful information to start off with. The best thing to do is to enter into configure collection.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So we want to think about the type of stuff that is going to be in this, because this is going to be the most complicated one probably from the perspective of the content going in there. So we've got a couple of options here. We can basically enable it to enable publish dates if we want to be able to publish information ahead of time without it publishing, becoming visible.
Yeah.
That I don't know how useful that would be for this particular site, unless you were doing some kind of sponsored thing. That might be like one type of thing where you'd be using that. Yep. There's no real harm in sort of leaving that live, but obviously it's just one of those things. Ordering, do we need to order it, or is it going to always be ordered basically on some of the data point, whether that's date? Okay, cool. So we've then got the content model. So we've got blueprints, and what we find is when you create a collection, if there isn't a blueprint that matches that collection name, it will automatically create a stubbed out collection for you. Stubbed out blueprint for you. We've then got a couple of things. So entries in this collection may contain links that are redirects to other entries and URLs. We'll leave that one for the time being. Yeah. It's a very useful concept, but
I'm assuming that's a little bit like Frake.dev, where he has link types, and if you click the link, it directs off to the other website.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's a great example of a use case for that. Taxonomies we'll come back to shortly because we need to create it. But it is just a select field for that, but we'll come back to that. Publish by default. Do we want to publish by default?
Yeah.
Probably. doing this. Template, we're just going to leave that as default for the time being. There can be times where maybe you've got multiple different blog types that you want to, sort of be able to select from. Not a case here, so we can just leave that as default. Layout, we'll leave that as layout. That's the default one. And then basically we've got title format. Let's just leave that one. That's for enforcing content standards.
Okay.
Routing and URLs. Obviously, we want to define that as post / and then curly boy braces slug.
Yeah, I mean, what this would be for me, this would be slug.
Mm-hmm.
There.
So we talking. So there's no like / post because obviously we've done that.
I don't think so.
No.
No.
No, that's fine.
I can't be bothered with CO2 redirects.
Yeah, no, that's yeah. Always avoid that. But yeah, no, that's effectively what we want to do there.
What, like that?
We need to. Yeah, precisely like that. Yeah.
Cool.
So require slugs. I was pestering the team for this for so long.
Yeah.
This is not something that you will need in 99% of use cases, but where you maybe have like repetitive post names, that is an absolute godsend. Mount. This is if you want it to be mounted to a entry in another collection. We probably will, but we'll come back and we'll do that a little bit later. That would be like, for example, where you have a page called posts in pages, and then you can mount this collection to that page so you can easily access it. Enable AMP, probably not. And then basically preview targets are just to do yours to be viewable within live preview. To be honest, that's not something I've ever really used. I'm not the person to comment on it. I think it's relatively recent, so we'll just kind of pretend that's not there.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like that'll affect me. So I can save that.
No, exactly. So we can save that now, yeah.
Saved.
Cool. So if we now go to create entry, we do need to do one other thing, but we'll kind of just, it's one of those things, sometimes it's good to see what it is before you change it, so we can kind of see what's going on. Okay, cool. So we've got our title, and by default, the content area will be set as a markdown field.
That works for me.
Yeah. What I would say, though, is that we probably do want to change that. There's another content field that is really, really useful.
Okay.
It's what Gutenberg could have been if the team at WordPress had actually stopped to go, we need custom fields before we do this.
Yeah.
But anyway, I digress. I've ranted about that for too many years to go over that again. So if we go to blueprints, what we'll do is we'll start thinking about what we need to add to basically make sure that our posts are giving us everything that we need. So one thing that I always say about content management systems, what make good content management systems, it needs to have a good developer experience, because at the end of the day, a bad development experience makes people just want to get out of it as quick as possible. And that's not going to be great for the end user, because obviously it's a rushed experience. They don't really care about it. It needs to have an excellent user experience. It needs to be intuitive, and that kind of comes from the developer experience, in the sense that if it makes it easy to create those great user experiences, it's going to happen. And the third thing, actually kind of tied into that one, by having that flexibility, you can kind of really limit what people can do. A good content management system only lets people change the stuff that they are supposed to be changing.
Definitely.
So, for example, you don't want your general marketing team being able to screw around with colors or layout beyond kind of placement of titles.
But
purely
you've
because
got to
they're
give them
not
the
brand.
freedom to creatively create their content within guidelines, right? You got to have these guardrails up,
exactly,
so that the design isn't broken, and then the UI team are angry,
yeah, you don't want to ever anger design teams. It's not worth
This
it.
reminds me
But yeah, I
very
mean
much
that kind
like a CMS I've used called Bolt CMS, which is Symfony based.
yes,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
a lot
it's a
more
nice CMS style.
controlled.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of for me, a good CMS is a bit like going bowling with the guardrails up, in the sense that it should be there to protect you or the
Yeah,
users. They're primarily non-technical people,
yeah,
and if a bad content management system is not going to be used, and I've been on both sides. I've been a developer and I've been a journalist using
yeah,
content management systems. So I've been on the receiving end of terrible content management systems, and it's
yeah.
not a fun experience. So, but
So what
anyway,
do I
what we'll
need to
have a
do?
look at here. So if we look in the tab section, basically these are, kind of aligned to what we saw on the actual thing. So you've got your main section, which is the one that's got the title and the content, and you've got a sidebar.
Yep.
So what we're going to do is, if we just bin content,
Boop.
okay, and we're going to create one. What we're going to do is we're going to look through the very large list of different field types. Now, the one that we want is the very first one. But again, this kind of feeds into that thing of a good content management system has a lot of different options that are appropriate for what you want to allow the user to be able to do. So we'll try and find some use cases for some of these. But if we go back up to the very beginning and we see Bard. So Bard is a flexible content editor that's kind of like a WYSIWYG, but without some of the downsides of a WYSIWYG.
Okay.
It basically outputs it as HTML properly. It can actually output it slightly differently as well, with a lot more control over things. So what we'll do is if we set Bard, okay, and let's call it content. I think, can you call Bard content? Or do you?
I don't see why not. It's content on the page, right? That's what
well, you never used to be able to.
Okay.
Yeah, you never used to be able to.
We'll see.
Content was a reserved word. So basically, again, this is kind of feeding back into that whole experience for non-technical users, being able to have instructions out of the box, do a couple of bits and pieces. But then at the bottom, we've now got this concept of sets, and sets are basically blocks of code, or blocks that can be separated from the main flow of the content. So that might be, say, something like a code example. So if we know we're going to need code examples, every developer blog does. So let's add a set and let's call it code example. Maybe code example might actually be a better way of putting it. Okay, cool. And so we're going to need to think about what are we going to need to have in a code example for it to work. So obviously the primary one is that we're going to need to have somewhere to place our code. Yep. So if we click into create field again, okay, and so we've got code block already, or a HTML block. I think if we put in code, again, this is a relatively new field. I believe it gives you the ability to define the syntax highlighting. So again, this is one of those things where you might have the, this is a great example actually of controlling what the user can do and cannot do. So you can basically set a default mode for what the syntax highlighting you want to allow to be used is. Now you could effectively have a couple of different ways of, a couple of different language options as a set. Probably not the best use, but we want to allow the user to select which one it is, because you might have HTML as a programming language. Did he just say that?
It's a markup language, but
it's a markup language.
We're not dissing it in any way. Yeah. HTML is required.
No,
exactly. It's not always good.
No, exactly. Yeah, I've seen way too much bad HTML for something that's supposed to be easy. Same thing goes for CSS. But anyway, We can have apply conditions if we want to only show certain fields in certain situations. It's probably not going to be the case. That would typically be something along the lines of maybe if we want to display a second button or something. But yeah, we're not going to come across that one. So if we now just click finish. Okay. And what else are we likely to need? What other sort of blocks of content do you have in your current blog?
I mean,
Did
it'd
I
be
see
nice
like
to
a
be able to
quote?
put like a GIF in there, maybe.
Okay. Yeah. So if we create not in that one, sorry. That's right.
Add a new
Cool.
set.
So we've got add a new set. So if you think of a set as like a block, so basically being able to say, I want to add a new GIF, I want to add a new code example, I want to add a new pull quote, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So if we just call that one GIF or something. Now, technically, this will probably be an image, but let's say you want to be able to paste a link to a GIF that you've collected, or maybe someone has built a GIF add-on, which is actually a great idea for an add-on if anybody is looking
really
to create one. just an API connection to Giphy.
Done.
Basically, this would just be, are we going to want to upload them? So the choice here would be, do we want to host it, or do we want to
link to it? I'd rather link to it personally.
Okay, so if we're going to link to it, now there's a couple of options here. You could go with text, but then technically you're allowing people to paste whatever they want in there, and it's not necessarily going to validate. It'll validate because it's text, but it's not necessarily a link. So there is a type a little bit further down, I believe, called a URL that will basically validate that the user has actually entered a URL. Or I am going to be made to look like a fool. No, maybe link. No, that's another resource. Actually, do you know what? That's me having a bit of a brain. I believe that is actually something they used to have before it was very easy to validate. So actually, it's probably text now. And if we go into the options, there should be the ability to select a validation type. Yeah, this is because I've worked now with Statamic for all three versions, even pre-Laravel. So it's easy to forget which version has which.
Cool.
So if we pick the input type, we can basically select URL, and then that will actually validate that it is actually a URL. And that's an incredibly useful tool for making sure that people only enter what they should be entering, because anybody who's worked with user-generated content will learn very quickly, do not trust people. People will, people will try to be naughty. Do we need a character limit for this? Probably not. Do we need to append anything? Probably not.
So we're good?
I'd say that's probably all we need.
Yeah.
Now, that might be a good example, actually, of we're not going to do it, but a good example of a conditional, that if we were going to basically have a Giphy section, we might say, is this one that you're uploading, or is this a link? And then have a toggle box, and then basically say, if the condition is upload, we would basically show the asset container or that type of thing. It's, again, one of these things where it's like, how do we make it as easy and as foolproof for users? So if we kind of leave that, are we wanting to leave GIF as without a Y or with an extra H?
There we go.
Yeah, cool. All right, awesome. So when we come down to the buttons, this is basically, if I remember correctly, this tool was originally developed by the team at The Guardian for basically editing their own content. It is a tool that allows you to pick basically what you want people to be able to, sort of mark things up as within the actual thing. So H1 is by default disabled because technically your H1 should always be
the page
Yeah,
title.
no, you don't want to give people the ability to do it. It should be a field, a text field, straight off. So if that's what we're going to go with.
Yep, I think I've chosen there. We've got H23, bold, italic, lists, removing formatting, probably not going to need, but I'll keep, block quotes, adding a link, inline code, and I've added code block, just for fun.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens with that.
But I'll keep
again,
it on
it's one
there,
of these
but
things where
realistically, I should be leaning towards using this up here, shouldn't I? This code
yeah,
example.
exactly, yeah. I might be made it for, it might actually be the same thing, but just in the sort of parcel thing. Whatever, we'll see. This is how you learn. You know, this is literally how you learn. So container we can ignore because we're not actually allowing people to inject images into that.
I don't want any images other than GIFs.
Yes, exactly. So this is what I was talking about a little bit before, where you can actually either output it as HTML or you can basically output it in template markup. Now, we probably want to go with the template markup just because it gives us a little bit more control over the actual outputted HTML rather than necessarily having to wrap everything in a single class and then output, sort of horrific semantic style CSS. But we'll come back to that one later. Toolbar can be fixed or floating. To be honest, I normally leave it fixed just because it can surprise people a bit when they hover over things and then it suddenly appears. Link, no opener. This one's a bit of a weird one. So obviously if you're
this is all about link security and target blank on its own being a little bit insecure, basically.
Yeah, so my one niggle with this is that there are times where you want to allow people to link out and there are times where you want them to link internally. If they're linking internally, you don't necessarily want them to apply no opener, no referrer to those links. It doesn't really make a massive difference, but it's one of those things where it would be nice to have a little bit more. If it was a local link, they wouldn't apply it. But anyway, one of those. Link collections, this would be really useful if you are you have a different collection. So maybe you could possibly have it where you have you're linking to your YouTube collection or whatever, but that's not really something we need to worry about now. We can come back. We can basically get show reading time, which I know you've already got the functionality for in your existing one, but obviously that just gives you an idea about how long it's going to be. Full screen mode, about allow source mode. It's your blog, that's fine.
Yeah.
But if you were talking about like non-technical people, you'd probably want to disable that.
Disable all the buttons.
Exactly. No, you literally put text in. That is it.
That's it. It's like an email, but we're going to put it on the website.
Yeah. So cool. Okay, right. In that case, I think we can probably save that. Yeah. So if we save that, and then if we go back up to the very top, let me save. Now, this is one of those classic things where you might sort of say, well, should we add an author? Well, you could, but you are the only author. Yeah. And
I mean, if I'm going to enable guest posting one day, not very likely to happen, but that would be a good situation.
No. So this is a really good example, actually, of where having a rudimentary knowledge of SEO can come in really helpful. If you think about it, if you create a link for the author, you're then creating a listing page for that author, which you then have to now create that view. You now have to make sure it's indexing properly. It's just creating a huge amount of extra work when you don't actually need it. So it's one of those things just to bear in mind. So we've got slug, we've got date. Let's save that. Done. Yeah, let's save that now. Okay, cool. And then what we'll do is we go to collection posts now, and let's just take a look at the blueprint that we've just created to make sure that so if you click on create entry on the right hand side, so top right. Yeah. Okay, so we've got our title, we've got this, and you'll now see a little plus icon to the left. This is basically how you add the sets. So you can basically add that, and then if you need to
Nice.
remove it, and yeah, basically that's literally the concept. So you can just write your general text,
I
and
can full
then
screen
basically
for focus,
you can full screen.
which is nice.
If you put in a title, you'll see that it is bound to the slug. You can, of course, update that slug. And the great thing is, if you go to live preview, whether this will work or not, I genuinely don't know, because obviously there isn't really any design to it. We haven't really got a template. There we go.
Yeah.
View default not found. Can't really use that.
Just
Though.
like
We'll come
that,
back
I've
to
made
that in a
something
bit.
look really good.
So cool. What we'll do is, if we just create a dummy post, so let's just put something in there, just so we've got something to work with while we're actually doing the views.
Save and
Cool.
publish. Done.
Yes, that's the one. Awesome. So we've now got our first post. And if we go to that URL, so if we go to your localhost /test, right. So we're going to get this error because our default view is not found. So if we go to our code editor, okay, cool. So if we go to resources now, if we go to views, okay, so this is pretty native Laravel, effectively.
Yeah.
So if we create a, have we got, you've already got your views effectively there, haven't you? So yeah, if you create a default.blade.php.
Yep. What I can do
And
is I could probably, that is all of that.
mhm.
That is probably the site there. There you go.
What we
Something
want
like
to do, there is a concept of layout and a concept of the template view.
Okay.
So kind of like a normal Laravel app, effectively. Obviously, we're using Blade partials here, but if we just take the, so we create another one called layout. I think it is. Just give me 2 seconds. Let me double check, because like any good developer, I can never remember, because that is what Google is for. Yeah, so it's actually layout.
So I need a directory or a
No, so it's at the top level, same as default.
Yep.
Okay, cool. And if we just put the X-Blade layout bit, so yeah, X-Site layout, and then what we want to do is paste that in there, and then if we copy that section back out. So this is again one of those times that we need to think about, how's the layout going to work. Is that section content, or is that section markup specific to that template? Or specific to that collection?
It's for all pages.
Okay, cool. So we can leave that there. All right.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is, where we've got slot, we are going to change that to.
Going to yield something maybe.
I'm actually trying to remember exactly what the default one is, because obviously Statamic by default uses its own templating engine called Antlers. I think it is. This is where I suddenly realized I actually haven't done this one for a while. Okay, so yeah, it's actually just extends layout section body. So yeah, it'll be a yield.
Yield. What am I yielding?
Whatever your content section would be. So it could just be template or template content. Is it usually? Just call it body, actually. Body will be fine. Okay. And then we just need to put whatever, so extends layout. And then section body. And then let's just put some default text in there just for a second to make sure it's definitely rendering. Because let's face it, it's always best to double check and make sure things are working. Yes, because nothing worse than running off and doing 5 different things and then not being sure what it was that broke it or what worked. Right, okay, cool. So if we go back, so if we...
my default template, right?
This is your default template, yeah. So you might end up wanting to rename that template to be posts, for example.
There we go.
Cool. All right, so let's just try and reload that now because I'm not entirely sure whether it might throw a bit of a hissy fit.
No, we're doing good.
No, it's fine. Cool. All right. So we've got that. What we're going to do is we are going to use the $page variable to start accessing content. So if we just do the easy one for the time being, and we basically do dollar, so it's as we normally do, page, and then just a title just for the time being. There we go. And if we now try the same with content, now this one probably isn't going to work.
I want to look at doing page content, right?
Mm-hmm. Right, rate of string conversion, because it will be an array. Now, if we look at, let's have a quick look. I'm actually just trying to think how we would actually handle this, because in Antlers you would typically do just the pointy brackets with the name of the variable, because it basically has automatic binding between the name of the variable and the output. But obviously, if we're doing it through Blade, there's a tiny bit more work that we need to actually do to actually get it to output. So one great thing about stuff being in flat file
it's saying,
is we can actually check.
It's saying to do... In the docs, it says to do that.
Yeah, for each. Yeah. Okay, try that. Let's see what happens. I think that would be if we were outputting it as just the default thing. Okay, right. So there's a really great benefit to stuff being in flat file in that we can actually go into the file system and see how it's been stored. So if we go into the content folder, into collections, posts, and then we'll be able to see our data. Yeah. So basically it's been set as an array because we've basically done it that way. Now, this is where it's going to get a bit weird.
Okay.
Do we need to do it as a for each?
I can handle that.
Mm-hmm. So if I'm right, it'll be a for each and if type equals. So if we just go back to the content file for 1 second. Okay, so if we see here, we've got basically a type of paragraph.
Yeah.
So what you would typically do is something like content if type is equal to paragraph, then output this. But obviously, we do that in handlers. So my gut inclination, because it doesn't look like the docs have it, it would be for each as you've done, and then we want to do an if type equals. So it would be content type equals. Actually, maybe that's actually one thing that we could do is if we just, before we do that, just output content type, or no, just carry on and see what happens. Sometimes it's just that thing of that gif of Elmo wanting to watch the world burn is the most appropriate thing for when you're trying to do this. So we do arrow title and see if we can access the, sorry, not title, type, and see if we can access the, we can do that, yeah. Yeah, cool. So
Cool.
let's say content arrow title, and just make sure that it's definitely outputting the, sorry, not title, I keep saying title, type, sorry. And let's see if it outputs it as
Text.
Paragraph. Text.
Text.
Yeah. Okay, right, cool. So what we'll do is we'll say if, so what we want to do is we want to say if type equals text, then for each, or is it that? I think if we do content text,
There we go.
there you go.
So,
Cool. So obviously we've now got that. So if we, yeah, because it'll output the p tags automatically.
yeah.
So one thing I typically do, and you don't by any means have to do this, and this is not Statamic specific, is I typically wrap the p like the output of text in a div. And then that means that you can then apply classes
Style
that
rules
get
to it.
inherited down.
I mean,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
I mean, what I'd be looking to do here anyway is, you know, wrapping that like that. Then if I, as an example, come down to here, this is how my article currently is.
Mm-hmm.
So this article block is, I literally grabbed the source code from the website, my current website, and pasted it in instead of grabbing the markup and moving it across. Okay, that's going to be a pain.
So yeah, I mean, effectively, you think about it, you've got the divide Y and everything else in there. Like, you know, you can just literally copy that down. I mean, we don't need to necessarily do that in this because that's more of a HTML thing rather than Statamic itself.
So that bit there. So
yeah,
this is the start of my content.
Yeah. Catherine is spot on as well, by the way. You can do that as a dynamic component.
Yeah.
So you basically just define it as if type equals, pull in this component.
So I can now literally just do it this way, grab that for each, get rid of that. I'll stick that in there for now. But what I would have is this, wrapping that. So this now looks a bit different.
There we go.
So that date is obviously something that I should be able to access as well, right?
Yeah, so in theory, it
that.
should be updated that. I think it's also in the actual title of the name of the thing. But yeah, if we just do update that,
I always forget the format that I like.
I think
So
it's
I
one of
always
those
come over
things
to
like
carbon.
regex, if you can remember it.
I always have to come over. Here we go. This is the one. And then we have let's see if this dies or if it works. There we go. So the only thing it's
There we go.
missing
Awesome.
is
It's the ordinal.
the day. Do I want the day? I kind of do want the day, don't I?
I suppose, do you want to show that you're posting stuff on Saturdays and Sundays?
Yeah. It looks nicer. Ooh.
Yeah.
Is it DD for a full date? No.
For the
Formats. Formats. How do I get the format? L. That's
like I
L.
said, this is one of those things where if
Okay.
you know this stuff off by heart, it's like those people who know regex off by heart.
There we go. We got there. Yay.
There we go. Awesome. So what we want to do is we want to now make sure that we're creating components for the GIF and
Yep.
for the, or not components, but set markup for the other ones.
Okay. So.
And yeah, Catherine's absolutely spot on. You can. I'm not going to lie. I genuinely can't think off the top of my head how you would do that in Blade. I could do it in Antlers very, very quickly, but in Blade, that's going to be
Dynamic components is what we're going to be looking for.
yeah, that's the one.
So we're going to want something like that. And for the sake of keeping it consistent,
Yeah, that's probably in components.
we will have content. Actually, no, I don't want to do that. Delete that. We're going to have a new component and we're going to call this no, I don't want that.
Yeah, there we go.
So that is a component. I'll add the class
Or
on just
dynamic
because for now. That should hopefully load that in. And what we want is that's not what we want, is it? We probably want this to be passed in as a prop, maybe?
Yeah, I was going to say you probably want to pass that in as a prop rather than to.
That's a
I mean, you can
component.
pass it in as a slot.
Let's pass the content through for now.
Yeah.
content. So it's complaining about that now. So,
there you go.
because it's text, I know that I can handle it
Yeah.
that way.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Awesome.
However,
Right.
if I edit this, for example, let's say we add another content block, and we add a code example.
Mm-hmm.
Save and publish. We're going to get an error.
Yeah.
So
Because
now
it
we have to
doesn't
go
exist.
and if I close that for now, close that text one and the view, what we have a type.
Oh, we've left it as a set. We've left it as a set.
That's fine. It's actually coming through and looking for code examples, so that's fine. So
Yeah.
that's when we get the code
Mm-hmm.
mode PHP.
So one really, really cool thing here that when you're doing this and you suddenly realize that you're actually calling it through wrong, you can actually just change the value in the markdown file and then go in and actually correct it in the content management system rather than having to delete it and then redo it.
So what I'm going to do, I'm going to die and dump on the content within here so we can actually see it and know what we can work with. Oh, hello, my face. Yeah. We have code, that's what's being passed through. Got code and mode coming through. So let's see what code is. There's a value. Okay, you can't get value.
There you go. However, it's got that lovely problem with auto formatting where it seems to pull through the pre and the code's indentation. There we go.
So here's my pre. Completely ignored the lang part.
Why is that content mode?
Okay, so I need the pre. I'm assuming for this I need to do something like that for formatting. Yeah.
Painfully, yes. Unfortunately, it winds me up.
It's a component,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Only thing is, I need to be able to get the other parts to it, right?
Yeah. Still confused as to why the mode is not coming through, but
yeah.
Is it possibly the brackets access?
So what we're looking for is Statomic fields. So if I get that,
Yeah, when in doubt, do this.
when in doubt, DD. Oh wait,
Yeah.
maybe not there though. There you go. It is an available string. So you've got value and extra.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens, I can get extra to string to array. So if I just looks ugly, but it works. And as it's a
Yeah.
static site, I suppose it's something I can live with for now. I mean, eventually I'll probably use something like Torchlight for this anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, it's literally not changed anything, but
No.
depending on which editor you use, like we've only got about 30 odd minutes or so left. So I usually finish
Yeah.
around now.
So
Let's get moving. I've got a page.
yeah, definitely. Okay, cool. So we've obviously done that. Obviously,
Yeah.
we'll leave the other bits because obviously I think that kind of has indicated how you would do that.
Let's talk
What we now
about the
want-
users page, because I think the users page of my current website, it's got a lot of interesting things that we could do to it.
Yes, exactly. So what we probably want to look at this, and it's like what we discussed before. You could have this as just one massive block of content, similar to what we were doing then. But I think realistically, each thing kind of gets taken out and moved of its own accord. It kind of doesn't feel right for that to be the way of doing it. So what we can do is if we go into collections now.
Yep.
And we want to create a new collection. And let's call it users or whatever we want to
I'll call it users.
make
It makes sense to me.
Cool. Okay, let's go back into config.
This doesn't have
And we're going
publishable.
to want... No.
Do I want it to be orderable?
We probably do. Okay, so we want to think about the ascending. Do we want to be able to nest them? Probably not. To be entirely honest, probably use some kind of grouping to basically split them into the different types. Does it expect a root page? No, because the key thing with this is that none of these collection items are going to be accessed directly. That we're going to output them on a page. So we don't need slugs. Blueprints, we can leave 2 seconds. Links, probably not gonna necessarily come out on that one, but we'll come back to that one afterwards. Taxonomies we won't have configured just yet, so we'll leave that. Publish by default is fine. And template and layout is absolutely fine, being that we won't obviously be rendering them out, so we don't need to worry too much about that.
Layout site, right? Oh yeah, we don't need to worry, do
we? Yeah, we don't need to worry yet. And then we don't need to worry about routing and URLs because again, we're not going to be outputting stuff. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So we've now got all that pretty much sorted. If we save that, like I said, I mean, as well, we can always come back and we can always, sort of update these things. So like if we just go through to create entry. So with this one, obviously the default is markdown. I really don't think we need to go into any more we don't need any more control on what markdown offers
on.
If I just
grab this, for example.
Mm-hmm.
That's it done.
Cool. And then if we just save and publish. Okay, cool. So we've got our first one. What we probably do want to think about though is obviously if we just go back to your existing website, there are is it two different types of groupings? So we've got workstation
and software and services.
Okay, cool.
And that's it.
Services.
Would they be
So
taxonomies,
we
or
probably
would that be? How would we
you could do them
categorize
in
this?
taxonomies. You could do them in taxonomies. You could also just literally have it as a text field and then basically search for contains. But if we maybe go through taxonomies, basically just to obviously use that. And if we create a taxonomy and let's just call it, I don't know.
Do I call it hardware or do I call it workstation?
No, so it'd actually be the taxonomy is actually the grouping of the thing that will contain workstation, software, and services. So
okay, so category.
Yeah, let's call it. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Right. So we want to create a term, and we don't need to really necessarily fill out any of the content. So we could literally say workstation, software, and then
services.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
And then if I come back to blueprints for users, I want to be able to add a new field. Taxonomies?
That's the one. It's actually, is it taxonomies or is it taxonomy terms? It might be taxonomy terms, actually. Yeah, and then
I just leave it named like that. And the taxonomy category.
Yeah, so maybe if we want to, I don't know, we could call it type or whatever, but we'll just leave it how it is just for the time being. It's just more so you know what it is that we're actually going to be using. And then what I'd probably actually think about doing is maybe drag that one over to your sidebar, just so it's kind of, yeah, cool. And then let's save that. Okay, if we go back to users and go back to create, we should now be able to link an existing item. Okay, select that. Cool.
Nice.
And then what we want to do is maybe just create one of each, just so we've got the ones that we can call through.
So software, PHP Storm. Grab a service and we'll go for Code Course, which is my go-to for learning. Although I'll make sure I spell it the way it's meant to be spelt. We'll put that down as services.
Cool. All right, cool. So what we now want to do is go to users.
I basically need to make sure that page is now not enabled in the routes, right?
So we can do it that way, or we can actually use some functionality within Statamic that allows you to define a page to be managed through Statamic. So if you give me 2 seconds just to pull up an example. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this and I'll drop it in at the bottom of your file.
This is a good thing about using something like Tuple.
Yes.
I got a Tuple t-shirt too.
You like it? I'm surprised you're not wearing it.
I'm wearing it. Look.
Cool. So you can.
People.
Oh, you are wearing it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It arrived today. I got well excited.
Repping Aaron. No, but honestly, Tuple is literally an absolute amazing
godsend for pair programming.
Yeah, 100%. And pair programming is a godsend for actually being a great way of doing that. So anyway, where was we've got web there. So basically it allows you to basically register web routes for the application. So we can literally define, so instead of using root get, effectively it's just root Statamic, and then we pass through whatever details we actually need to actually pass through in that sense.
Sure, is it still the root facade? Is there anything that I need to do macro-wise, or will it just handle that?
It should handle it for you in theory. Just double check the root.
Well, it's not crapping out. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I'm just going to double check the root services provider and make sure that it doesn't actually add anything in there. No, interestingly not. No, so it just looks like it's PHP Storm isn't picking it up as a valid additional on the back of it.
Macros probably won't do, to be fair. So that means my resources, views, pages, users within here. I should have a page, in theory.
In theory.
No.
No, we don't. So we need to pass through. Right, so we need to probably pass through that.
Do I need to go to a controller?
That is a very, very good question. It may be. This is possibly one of those limitations of where normally I've ever done this for static content where I'm not having to create stuff. So let's take a quick look at this. So you've got data passing through, return my view. That's an Angular's view. We don't really care about that. This could be one of those times where they have not got the documentation up on it just yet. If not, what we'll do is we will just we could possibly use a query builder.
Yeah, let's have a look at this.
We'll need to pull in the entry. I believe it's
facade.
No, it's facades, yeah. And then what we want to do is we want to change the operator within where to users just to make sure it pulls through the correct one.
So page isn't going to exist, which is fine. Array merge, closure given. Okay, have it your way.
Starting CP collections entries that are not defined. Do you know what? Let's figure this, because this is where you start getting into a dark tunnel of having to effectively rebuild stuff that already exists. If we just go back to the content management system and we just basically add a new collection called pages. And again, we'll just use the default one for this because.
Yep.
So if we go to edit entry and we create one called users.
Create entry and make it called users.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. And save and publish.
That's done.
Okay. Right. So if we now go to open that route, we'll need to remove the code from the web root just to make sure that we're not accidentally
This
picking
bit.
that up. Yeah.
So we shouldn't need that anymore.
Okay, so we go 404. Oh, I know why. If we go back to the configures, because we haven't configured a slug for it.
What, for
So
pages,
the
yeah.
3 dots next to, yeah, 3 dots next to create entry in the top right corner, and we can then edit the collection. And if we just scroll down to the bottom, we probably want to make this audible as well, actually, thinking about it.
Require slugs.
Yeah, and we just want to put the sluggers. It'll be, again, same as what we did for posts.
Do I need to connect entries?
Probably not just for the time being. We'll do that if it becomes obvious that we're going to need to. And we probably do want to have a root page on this one because we want it to be home. Okay, so if we did we put the correct slug into that I didn't see? No, so just we need to put it in here. So I thought I still had the pencil on them. That's the one downside of
Users.
Okay. We'll need to actually make that just the typical slug /bracket slug, just otherwise, because obviously that's
Yeah.
This is just the generic one. So
Saved.
if we save that, we go back to the tab, and if we try this tab now, the one that's not found, and refreshing to see whether that actually now picks it up. Of course, it doesn't, because that would be too simple.
Way too simple.
Right. Let's just double check. So we've got users, and then let's try visit URL and see if we. Okay, pages users read.
Oh, it's complaining about my nav now. 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Components, nav. Ooh, something died somewhere. Let's get to the
There we
homepage.
go. That will probably be because it is requiring the root page. So if we come back out of that.
Yep.
Okay, if we just go back to pages. Okay, let's create a new entry called home. Okay, so publish. Okay, cool. So if we click on, I think it's this one, I think that allows you to define. Oops, I just realizing I wasn't leaving too many of them. Okay, right. If you put it into this one up here, tree mode, yeah. So we've got, there we go. That'll automatically say it as home. And then we've also got users. So if we click back into users now, let's see if that actually picks it up or whether it's picking up the wrong one now.
It's going to the default view now. Loading with default view.
Yeah.
So
okay,
this is
right.
where...
So we need to. Cool. So if you go back to your code editor, then I think the key thing that we need to do is just to be able to create a new default view.
So what we need really is we need templates. Move that one into there.
Yeah.
And then That's configuring all of that stuff.
I believe it'll be closer. It's in the actual collection itself. So I think if you go to content, collections, and it's in the YAML file. So the there we go.
Let's just close all of those. So if I come down to templates,
Yeah.
if I grab that, create a new one.
Didn't even have to tell you about that, did I? It's just intuitive.
You pick it up quite quickly.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to grab that article and I'm just going to delete that. See what the page is giving me.
I'm not entirely sure where it's getting a for each from.
Okay. Let me make sure.
There we go.
There we go. Got there. So I've got a page. No data though.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Right. I've got a few minutes left. Let's fix this.
Yes. Okay. Right. So let's think about this, right? So we're getting no data through. What would be the reason for that? That would be because we actually have no data. That would help. Because all we're doing here is we're then going to basically go into the template. So obviously we'll fix this another time.
This here.
Yeah, this page has no data apart from the title, right? Because all we're going to do is if we go into basically that template for the time being, it's not so much that. I mean, what I would actually say is what we want to do is to basically leave it like that because that's all we really need for the time being. But if we go through to that template just for the time being. Okay.
This one.
Yeah, that one, yeah. What we need to do is we need to basically call through the content of the taxonomies. So if we basically use, I'm just going to try and find the specific.
Is this where it's easier in Antlers?
It's a lot easier in Antlers, yeah. But I think the key thing is that, obviously there is a real reason for using Blade. Has made a tiny bit more complicated. But what is life without a challenge?
Exactly, right?
I'm
keeping you young.
Exactly, or old, depending on how we go as it.
We'll
okay, cool,
right. For the vote.
Okay, cool. So, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop this in. Now, this is not going to be necessarily the correct one, but we can basically call through for each Statamic. It's currently calling through tag collections pages. So tags within Statamic are effectively a data structure that you can basically use to call specific stuff. But what we're going to do is we're going to change this to taxonomy, maybe. By taxonomy, I think it probably is more of a singular. And then we'll change that to category of categories. We can try this first. We'll just do, let's change page to, that is maybe too used to VS Code for my own.
Yeah, you're using VS Code. I'm using PHP Storm.
It's one of those. I know. I was like, as soon as I did, I was like, no, that's not the one. Right. Taxonomy title will probably be sufficient if this works. So let's give that a try and just
this one. Do I need to?
You may need to. I don't think you do. I'm pretty sure when I've played with this before, it does just pull it through. But
hey,
yeah, there we go. So we've got the tiles. What we then need to effectively do is basically use the same logic to pull through the entries. Now, in theory, if we DD taxonomy, it should have the entries attached. And what we'll then want to do is, again, we could use this as a dynamic component to basically pull through the title and the taxonomies for each one. Let's see what dates we've got. Okay, so we've got term. And this is where it starts getting a bit funky at times. So we need to pull through the taxonomy terms. Which is going to be one of those ones where this is where it will get a little bit more complicated because it's part of the fun. So we could do it. Let me just see if we can try and find it in because it is fairly. In fact, do you want to pull up in the docs so everyone can see it rather than me kind of doing it as a mystery? If you just search for taxonomy in that. Okay, cool. And what we're looking for is the taxonomy tag. So if we look for example, it's probably a good one. Okay.
This is obviously using Atlas.
This is using Atlas, but it's a good way of because obviously the documentation isn't all there. It's quite a good way of basically showing how to apply the Atlas documentation to Blade. So what we can basically do is we can see we've got entries. So basically entries, whenever you see that kind of thing, it's a for each loop. Which one was that for?
Services.
Let's take a quick look at this. So it's taxonomy categories, title, entries. So basically, when we look at entries, iterate either each entry. So how would we access the entries? Because a lot of this is, like I said, it's very easy when you do it in Atlas, but if you don't want to use Atlas, this is where it kind of starts getting a little bit confusing and possibly pushing the limits of what you can do at the moment. So basically, we've got taxonomy. When we pull this through,
we've got a localized term.
Yep. And selected query columns. So yeah. Where are we looking for this now? Is it down by collection as filterable on taxonomies again?
This is where you just start playing with the docs and playing the code.
This is like literally probably one of the more rougher parts of where they've completely rebuilt the whole thing from scratch. So, and taxonomies is a nightmare at the best of times. So basically, the way that, if I remember when I've looked at the code before, especially during the beta, is that effectively the entries tag is effectively a alias for running a Statamic collection query and then filtering by taxonomy. So effectively, we're currently calling through the templates or the taxonomy through the Statamic. So it's effectively instead calling a collection
I mean,
with
there's
the
no
type of users.
Is there any reason why I wouldn't use antlers?
It depends if you are already using, sort of if you're just very much native to Blade. You can actually mix the two. Obviously, not in the same file, but you can actually, have a Blade, what I would call furniture. So your header, your footer, everything else, if it's common to the site, common to your application, but you want to have that. And then you could literally have just a sort of an antlers file where we would basically then call for that. So I don't know whether you want to quickly try that or whether you want to maybe leave that for another attempt. Or
I think maybe we should leave it for another attempt.
Yeah.
I'll try it. So
Yeah. It's antlers.html.
Is this all going to work?
And then if we just that might not, but if you take something like, I've just copied the code in, so if you basically paste that in now, theory. No, it's sure. Oh, I didn't realize that. That's quite clever.
There we go.
There we go. Give that a go. We've already got categories, haven't we? I think was it categories or was it category? Because it will automatically try and call through default layout.
So
I think if you go to the markdown file for users, and in the same way you define the template, you can just define the layout as well. So it's layouts.site, isn't it? I think.
Nope.
However, that is going to throw a hissy fit. Why are you not actually paying attention to that? Is it potentially because it's been overridden in the actual entry itself? If you go into pages, users, and just define again, just put layout. So you can override all those variables at an entry level. Layouts to pages not found.
Right.
Oh, yeah, taxonomy. Yeah, that's what we want to see. So it might be category. And we just need to change the one at the bottom. Otherwise, the tags are not. Yeah, there you go. Okay, why is that not coming through? Okay, if you
Nope.
No. Right. I think it's going to be one of those ones where we probably need to
pick it back up another time, I think. Otherwise, I'm going to be here for a very long time and I won't see my daughter today.
That's fine. It's one of those things, like I was saying before the show.
Yeah.
It's unfortunately Statamic is very much like trying to teach Laravel in an hour and a half. It's a very, very large application. So
Definitely.
yeah.
Well,
All
thanks
right.
for joining me. I mean,
Cool.
I wasn't expecting to learn Statamic in 2 hours. I was expecting to
No,
get an idea of how I can use
the
it,
scope.
you know, the scope of it, and what options are available to me as someone wanting to build a website, basically. So
Yeah. Well, hopefully it's giving you an indication anyway, and obviously, hopefully
yeah,
we'll be able to work on it a lot more in the
yeah,
future.
I'm gonna
Because
spin up a demo site
yeah.
and just have a bit of a play with it, use antlers, and
Hmm.
just see what I can get doing. Should be
Yeah,
fun.
definitely.
Cool. Well,
Awesome.
thanks for coming. Um,
Yeah, thanks for
that was
having me.
fun. I learned
Yeah,
something. I like learning
yeah.
stuff. Um, Learning things is fun. Um,
Learning things is fun. Yes.
so thanks very much. In the description
Yeah,
below, everyone, there is a link to Ben's Twitter. Make sure you give him a follow. If you enjoyed it, make sure you give this video a like, drop a comment.
we
If you
did
really want to, you can
throw in salsa.
subscribe. I just usually just me rambling on for 2 hours, but I've got a couple of guests at the minute. But yeah, thank you. That was fun. That was awesome.
Yeah,
And
thank you for having me on.
thank you, Tubal, for allowing me to use the platform to do these streams easier. Tubal.app. Do it. So yeah, have a good weekend. I'm streaming again next week. And Ben, we will catch up and we'll organise doing something with antlers at some point. I will go away and
Yeah,
I'll
definitely.
figure it out. And what we'll do, we'll start a site without any. This is how I want it to look, or this is how it needs to be done. I'm like, okay, instead of here's all loads of
Yeah,
blades that I've done, it'll be cool. Now let's just go build it with Statamic. So it's less of a
yeah. We might
yeah.
work
I
together
think I
to
put
get
a couple
some
of
HTML
barriers up
done.
straight away, didn't I? So
It's one of those. It's a good learning experience. So it's fine.
it's true. Cool. Well, thank you very much. Thank you everyone who tuned
Awesome.
in. Have a good night, everyone, and I will see you next time. Thank you very much. Good night.